I don't have bios, but I think most of our audience knows who you guys are. So I wanted to at least give you a couple of seconds to introduce yourselves, though, to some folks. Obviously, you're from Black Alliance for Peace, organization that is. Kim, thank you for coming on. I appreciate
I'm
that.
sorry.
It's all right.
I'm redeemed. We're redeemed now.
I had to let the dog in. I couldn't just leave the dog outside. I had to go retrieve her.
That's a good reason.
Good morning. How y'all feel?
Good.
So BAP is an anti-imperialist. Is it fair to say a Black organization has allies of all different kinds, but works on issues of imperialism, ending U.S. foreign policy, imperialist actions in other states or around the country, points out the connections to domestic and international policy and how those things are oppressive, not only to Africans on the continent, but us over here, and U.S. imperialism and dominance of Europe around the world. And so that was my own unread overview of what BAP is. But I'm going to start, Tunde, who I'm going to let you start by doing a brief intro about yourself, and then we're going to go to Netfa, then we're going to get into the conversation.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name's Tunde Osazua. I am with BAP, with BAP's U.S. Out of Africa Network, which is a network of organizers and activists that are committed to strategizing around and pursuing creative and radical tactics for the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from Africa and, the closure of U.S. military bases throughout the world and shutting down AFRICOM, obviously. Also a member of, the Africa team of the Black Alliance for Peace, which is, doing a lot of the work, too, to put together this International Month of Action against AFRICOM. I'm also with Community Movement Builders here in Atlanta. So, me and Kamal, we know each other. But yeah, we're glad to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Oh, yeah. And I'm Netfa Freeman. I'm on the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. The co-coordinator along with Margaret Kimberly of the Africa team, Black Alliance for Peace Africa team. And also a member organization of the Black Alliance for Peace, Pan-African Community Action, PACA, here in DC. We work for community-based power with the revolutionary Pan-Africanist lens, and we pretty active in Black Alliance for Peace.
Cool. So let's start, maybe for you, you can start us off by telling us a little bit more about what the International Month of Action against AFRICOM is going to entail. What is it that you're asking folks to do? What is it that BAP is going to do? And what made you guys even come up with this idea of having this month to shut down AFRICOM?
Right. If it's, I don't know if it's possible, I'm going to put this, if it's possible to show this as this thing I put in the chat as I'm talking, because it'll help and people can see it. And so the International Month of Action against AFRICOM is something this is our third time doing it. The U.S. Out of Africa Shutdown AFRICOM campaign is, I guess you would call it maybe the flagship campaign of the Black Alliance for Peace. AFRICOM is this U.S. Africa Command. So a lot of people may not know that the U.S., or you probably do know, that the U.S. has littered the globe with military bases and Africa command centers and just all types of militarism around the world. And one of those to coordinate the military domination in Africa is the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, which was officially launched in 2008. The U.S. Out of Africa Shutdown AFRICOM campaign is to do exactly that, shut down AFRICOM and get the U.S. out of Africa, because it just facilitates imperialism, and that the idea is to build a mass radical social justice movement that is strong enough to do exactly what we're saying. And one of the things is to, obviously the foundation of that is to build awareness around AFRICOM and expose what its role and purpose is, and expose the outcomes of it. And so this is the third time we're doing it. This is the third time we did during this month of action. The AFRICOM, the campaign started a little bit before then, but the International Month of Action against AFRICOM is to get people to be anyone who within the sound of our voice right now or anything else that we do to come on to these actions. And throughout the month, we're going to kick it off with this webinar that is at the top of the page. It's the October 1st, which is the anniversary of the beginning of AFRICOM, the official launching of AFRICOM. So every October 1st, we do a webinar featuring mostly heavily people on the continent of Africa from radical movements that can address this, show people about it. And then throughout the rest of the month after the campaign, after the webinar, we do encourage people to do teach-ins, to do direct actions. This time we encouraging banner drops where people just go into a very highly visible place and drop a banner. This page that you're showing now has all the tools that the people need to do that, a toolkit. Even we're encouraging people to do teach-in, so it has module for teach-in, and however you can do it. And then the last week, and Tunde can correct me if I'm forgetting something. And then you'll also see there's a brochure there, the 3 trifold brochure that people can print out and use to pass out, and that the last week we're going to encourage people to use their social media and the hashtag #ShutDownAfricom and also US out of Africa to just do things, take pictures, show with your actions. There's some graphics, infographics or graphics that we've put up there for people to do. You can do your own stuff with the hashtag, but that's the month of action in a nutshell.
So
how do you do a banner drop? That sounds, I'm like in my head, I'm like, ooh, there's a nice spot on Kenilworth Avenue. You could do a nice banner drop.
Right.
Is that,
and maybe we can hook up and you can join. That's a good suggestion. That's exactly what we mean. Coming over either a highway overpass or from a building, if you have access to a big high-rise building or someplace visible, whatever you can. Everybody doesn't have access there, and just drop something and show it that the people that will get attention. And a good thing to do when you do it is also to have people situated somewhere where they can take a photograph of what you've done and then post it. But that's basically it. Just have a banner making party, create something visually compelling, and then find some place to drop a place or two, because sometimes people do it a couple places. They take the banner, put it somewhere. You want to leave it up for a little while so people can see it. And last year somebody did something over. It wasn't it was over that one 295 something.
For there are folks obviously who know through and through what AFRICOM is, what it represents. There's going to be others who are kind of like, it's the United States, and of course they're just fighting terrorism. So when you dig deep with folks and you talk to them about what AFRICOM is and what it represents, what do you tell them to get past the propaganda of the United States is just offering military assistance to stop terrorism, to help support young African nations in developing, to help leadership, to bring stability? What is it that you tell them AFRICOM, the role of AFRICOM really is in terms of the world order for European domination?
Yeah, I can start with that question. What we understand is that in 2007, the U.S. Department of Defense, came to the decision that AFRICOM was necessary due to the increasing strategic importance of Africa, and kind of gave the direction or the instruction that it should be created. But what we understand is that, the real purpose of AFRICOM is to enable terrorism while at the same time prosecuting the war on terror in Africa. So it puts the continent in like a constant state of war and instability. And so it really nurtures and justifies its own reason for being, and, develops like this dependence of African states on AFRICOM for their defense. And so, they're made to kind of comply with US and Western strategic interests, which is really just the control and unfettered access to Africa's natural resources. So, what we've seen is that research data shows that since the founding of AFRICOM, there's really been a very, intense increase in terrorist groups operating on the continent. So while they say they're fighting terrorism, there's actually this 500% increase in terrorist incidents on the continent. There's also this increased incidence of coups of African soldiers who have been trained by U.S. military or NATO forces, and so that also increases their I guess the allegiance of these African states to U.S. imperialist interests. So there's a lot of I guess justifications for why AFRICOM exists, but we understand that it's really just to assert U.S. and Western dominance over the continent, and to support U.S. foreign policy and U.S. national interests.
Mm-hmm. And I think also that we should be aware of the current situation, that a lot of propaganda is going out here about China, on China's influence on Africa, and even Russia now, they're saying, and the compradors in the Congress here, we call them compradors on the continent of Africa, and they compradors here too, are trying to pass. They introduced, I think it was Gregory Meeks in New York, and the rest of them have signed on and passed the House this act called the Countering the Malign Activities in Africa, Countering the Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act, something like that. And so this is basically dictating the terms of bilateral relations that African countries can have, under the guise of saying that, obviously the malign activities in Russia and whatnot. And so it doesn't matter what we think or really about what Russia on the African continent. It should be up to the African people to be able to determine whatever relationships they have with however they seem fit. So it's a breach of the sovereignty. It's against the UN Charter. The U.S. Congress and the Senate government does stuff against U.S. international law all the time. But this is just one thing. And the propaganda around it is also very heavy. But we want to remind people it's not China or Russia that colonized Africa. It's the Western European countries. It's not China or Russia that picked up that mantle and has created the most sophisticated forms of neocolonialism on the continent. It's the United States that did that, and is continuing through NATO and through all forms of the coercion through the international financial institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, and all that, World Trade Organizations that are dominating Africa and have propelled it into the conditions that we see now, where the people are not, we're not in control of our own resources. And I say we because I'm a Pan-Africanist, and it's all of us, the same situations. They're doing the same counterpart thing to us here, as Tunde talked about. In terms of the police, and China and Russia hasn't done any of that. It doesn't matter. And we're not trying to, glorify anybody's role here, but we know the most insidious and the existential threat on the continent of Africa and to the world is the US, EU, NATO axis of domination.
So, Netfa, I have a question. Like, there are some Ghanaian folks that I follow on social media, and over the past couple to few months, I've seen them very vocal about a recent agreement that allows the United States and the military to have more influence or access in Ghana. Can you talk about the coalitions and the partnerships and the ways in which organizations like BAP are building with people on the continent to get also to shut down AFRICOM, right? Because Africans does not want Americans there. But the leadership in some instances are rolling out the welcome mat for the U.S. military. So how can we help our folks in countries where the U.S. has set up shop to also help to advocate to get the military out?
Mm-hmm. I think this is a better Tunde question, but I want to say one thing before I say about the agreement. And then it's a very important thing that people need to understand, and the people in Ghana are up in arms about. We hear all kind of craziness on the news, but we never hear about stuff like this. And one of the nature of that agreement is to basically give, and this is what's known as lily pad, some lily pad bases, where the U.S. government and the military has access to military bases of African countries. So, you might have a place where there's not actually a U.S. military base, but by de facto access to the military base of that country, they really have military there and special operations forces and whatnot. And in Ghana, the agreement is also to basically give up the runway, or maybe somebody might what you call it, the Airway anyway.
Airstrip, the landing strip.
And just the whole airport, and just have them basically have complete control over it, in addition to the military there. And so people have been protesting about it. This agreement kind of started a few years ago, right? It's not the beginning of it, but it's just now being solidified.
Yeah, and I think when you speak to how we are working with comrades and movements and organizations on the continent, Netfa and I are based here in the U.S., and so as we're talking about things like AFRICOM, we understand that the need for leadership and guidance from forces from the continent in doing our work as it's focused on the continent that they live in. We want to be able to support their efforts because they're on the front lines of these types of struggles, and we don't want to traffic in like control from the outside or anything like that, like violation of. So we formed a steering committee of the USOAN, or our U.S. out of Africa network, kind of to streamline the coordination and diversify the work of the campaign and to achieve our goals. And we see it as really important that organizations on the African continent and not those in the diaspora like really leading this effort. And so we've sought out a lot of different radical formations and movements that kind of like I said, are on the front lines, like the Zimbabwe movement of Pan-African Socialists, the Revolutionary Socialist League in Kenya, the Economic Fighters League in Ghana, which has spoken a lot about that issue that y'all mentioned, right? Like the U.S. Having control over, I think it's the KIA terminal in the Ghanaian airport, and really having kind of like a logistical support base there, and that it's really just used by these Western forces to I guess funnel in their folks, their military equipment and things like that. And we also work with a number of other formations like the PAIGC, the Moyo Pan-African Solidarity Center, the Amilcar Cabral Ideological School Movement in Nigeria, like a number of groups, right? And so they're really providing a lot of leadership and guidance, and we're trying to support their efforts, and then also just work jointly on different efforts. So a lot of these formations are, preparing for this month of action. They have, a lot of events planned. For example, like the Revolutionary Socialist League in Kenya is having a number of study sessions in week 2 throughout in different parts of the country, in like Ukombozi and Dandora, Muranga, Kisumu, all over Kenya, right? Like we're speaking to folks in Zimbabwe who are planning events, comrades in Ghana. So we're really thinking about how can we work together and build this struggle to shut down AFRICOM, through our efforts to build with folks on the continent, and that's really kind of our approach to follow the leadership and guidance of folks who are on the front lines of this struggle.
Yeah, Netfa, I'm glad you opened the door to this prior. So the conversation about imperialism and what is imperialism, and there's a lot of conversation in the BAP chat. A lot of conversation. Did I stress there's a lot of conversation? A lot of on exactly who is an imperialist, right? What is what country should be designated as imperialism or as imperialists, and kind of like does that mean that the focus of BAP should be broader? In essence, I'm paraphrasing what it feels like someone else's argument is, to say that other countries, i.e. China, Russia, are also imperialists, and so therefore should be treated in the same way as the United States. And then there's others who argue, which individually I would probably be on this side, is that there might be others who are aspiring imperialists, or others who aspire to be world powers, and others who enter into negotiations. Sometimes those are unfair, but there's obviously a dominant system in place that is, as Tunde referenced before, taking resources, land, people, controlling militaries, and so forth. And so, again, when you talk to folks about imperialism, and what imperialism is vis-a-vis Africa. How do you describe it, and what is it in terms of what BAP is working to stop?
Mm-hmm. This is a great question, and it comes up a lot. Let me see how I can do this in the most succinct way and not get too. So I think of imperialism. One is the evolution of capitalist development, capitalist stage of the internationalization of capitalism, and looking at it from what we would consider a historical materialist view. I'm just speaking for myself right now because BAP is not all, we're a coalition, and so everybody doesn't have, an alliance, everybody has, but and so if we look at that as an evolutionary situation, and then referring to even works like V.I. Lenin, who wrote the book Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, and where he describes the encroachment of banks and the role of banks and international finance capital facilitating things, the role of even the roles of the militaries of the Western powers, and that development and the mantle of that being passed on, whether consciously or not, to the United States, because the United States now is the biggest imperialist. In other words, it's also, and especially when you talk about it in terms of colonialism. And then I would raise up the work of like Kwame Nkrumah, who wrote that book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism, where he talks about how the colonial powers had to concede to the movement for independence around the world, particularly in Africa, and they had to concede to it, but at the same time devising ways through international institutions like the ones we mentioned, trade relationships and international institutions like the World Bank and the IMF and the World Trade Organization. These things are outgrowths of the intent, insistence on the Western imperialism and domination to keep its domination. And then these different countries also have institutions that they use, like in the U.S. is the USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, their CIAs and their intelligence agencies. All of that is imperialism, and that anything else is not at the most, like you said, maybe aspiring capitalist or world dominating power. And we have to talk about the military, because NATO and its appendages like AFRICOM and all the armies of France and all that. This is what imperialism is. If we were to talk about China and Russia, they don't really have any of that. China is a fledgling capitalist society that comes out of the socialist movement of the Soviet Union. It's a fledgling capitalist society, and at best is trying to navigate not being completely dominated by Western imperialism. And just like so it's a whole. It can be complicated though, but this is how we got to define it. If we add the factor of the military, which is very important, we don't see any presence, particularly on the African continent, like the United States and France, and maybe to a lesser extent Italy, on the continent of Africa. The United States and France, the NATO countries, are what's propelling the continent of Africa into the condition that it is. China has one in Djibouti, one military base, and all the way in Djibouti, and then Russia maybe have a couple. And then we have to look at this, because also what is the difference between, especially when you talk about China and Russia on the African continent, the difference between the state actors and private corporations and whatnot. People don't make a distinction, and so sometimes people will talk about the behavior of maybe a company in China, but as if it's also the state of China, and that those relationships. And so when we look at China's Belt and Road Initiative, it's not a panacea, but it's building infrastructure on the continent of Africa. It's giving interest-free loans, and then just recently erased the debt of these interest-free loans anyway, of like, was it 23 African countries? When has imperialism, U.S. and the World Bank ever done that? At most, they've alleviated the interest of some of them, but in general, that's what they do. Is they loan sharks. I mean, that's the business they in. This is what imperialism is. And if we were to look at what is the existential threat to the world, the globe, it rests with these imperialists, what we define as the imperialist countries. The rest is not. And at the most, at most is really trying to navigate it's well, and also just it's doing different things in terms of climate change and green energy and all that. The U.S. is really just, and Western countries are really so disingenuous, particularly the U.S. is really disingenuous about. And so I think it would behoove to study the evolution of colonialism and its flourishing into imperialism, and then compare that in contrast to the historical relationship that these other countries have with it.
Today, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I was giving us.
No, I think that was pretty good.
To wrap it up. Okay. So let's wrap up soon. But can you guys again? I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Tell folks how they can get in touch with BAP. They can be involved with the International Month of Action Against AFRICOM, Shut Down AFRICOM movement.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can start off. Yeah, so definitely want folks to check out the site blacklinesforpeace.com/AFRICOM 2022. Like we showed earlier, lots of resources in terms of how to participate in the month of action. We're encouraging folks to endorse at this time, endorse the month of action, whether it's your organization or as an individual, and then watch the webinar. In that first week, the second week, try to organize some sort of educational event like a teach-in, and we have a teach-in guide on that site. In the third week, we're hoping folks can put on some sort of direct action or banner drop, and then on the fourth week again, like the social media push and just sharing materials that are available or have been created to really raise the public consciousness around this issue of AFRICOM, and how I guess the militarization of the African continent really connects to the militarization we're seeing here in the U.S. They're using the same tactics, strategies, and methods, and often the same types of weapons to carry out this war on our people. So yeah, just really want folks to plug in and see how they can connect with this effort, because we think it will be pretty impactful for this effort to fight imperialism. I don't know if Netfa, you want to add anything.
And as you add something, our other producer, Ricky Ryan, asked you to make comment about another conference or event coming up.
Yeah, I saw you. I just put in there, if you can put that, that's the flyer to it. It's not a conference, it's a workshop. It's the ballot and community control over police we're doing with the Sojourner Truth School on September 29th at 6. It's online, it's free. And we're talking about community control of the police, and I'm facilitating the workshop, but it's talking about community control of the police, but also not just how people can win it as a campaign and challenge for it through the ballot initiatives and referendum, and that's what it is. And just check it out. I think the website is on there, the truthschool.com/events or something. You might have to do it.
Exactly, yeah. Truthschool.org /events. Again,
it'll be other it'll be other classes on there, but you should be able to find it pretty easily. So that's good. Thanks, Ricky. And then what did you ask me? It was something else. Was that it?
I think I just was asking you guys about how people can get involved, and I think Tunde handled a lot of that. Yes. But yeah.
I mean, I won't have it. He did a good job to reiterate the blackallianceforpeace.com/AFRICOM 2022.
And so we should have y'all both on again anytime to not only discuss this, but world events and things that are happening. So we appreciate you guys come, even with my bad production skills, of getting you the link maybe 30 seconds before you're supposed to come on, and then dropping it in the BAP chat. I did everything right this morning. I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate y'all. I watch the morning show every morning. I do it on my TV, so I can't always get on the chat, but
you should think about coming on as a host, brother, man. You got that voice.
I think you guys should definitely come on like at least once a month. We should have Black Alliance for Peace come on and give us a roundup, a report, an update, a check-in.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That's a brilliant idea. Once a month. Let's do it once a week.
Once a week. Even better. Come on.
Well, I mean, it's not a bad idea, and we have enough people who could do it, and it would really be great. But then somebody got to do the coordination work. and I don't know who's gonna do that. That's one of those.
Oh,
We can just coordinate you with Ear Doctor. Ear Doctor is the point person
Well,
for the
who's
morning
going to be
show.
the point person? for that?
Thursdays is open. Thursdays is open.
there
Well, what
you
we
go.
could do, I have an idea. What we could do,
I'll
we could
think
just
about.
send
I'll
you
take it
guys.
back and find out who can.
What we could do, we could just send y'all here. Here's the Thursday link
little
for
man.
this week. Whoever
Mhm.
signs, whoever has time, come on. Let's just
Okay.
make it that simple.
Oh, cool.
Good idea.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank y'all for coming on. We're gonna see y'all later.
Thank you.
Peace.